Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to be late. And I have a few things to start with, so I hope you'll bear with me for a moment. Starting with starting with quite all right. Please continue. Starting with travel, Secretary Blinken will depart tonight for Vienna, Austria, where he will serve as head of delegation for the United States during the high-level segment of the 67th session of the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs. The Secretary will be working to build on the momentum of the global coalition to address synthetic drug threats that he launched last summer, and which now has 149 countries and 14 international organizations participating. This administration has made it a top priority to address the fentanyl and synthetic drug crisis, and this will be the first time a U.S. Secretary of State has attended a meeting of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. While there, the Secretary will emphasize that illicitly manufactured synthetic drugs and their precursors pose a threat not just to the United States, but to all nations. He will look to secure concrete commitments from countries to take domestic, regional, and international action to address synthetic drugs and their precursors, which are fueling the public health crisis both in communities across the United States and around the globe. Secretary Blinken will also meet with Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer and Foreign Minister Alexander Schallenberg during his time in Austria to reinforce our strong bilateral relationship. We are working together with the government of Austria to meet humanitarian needs in Ukraine and ensure the integrity of EU-Russia sanctions. The Secretary will then travel to Seoul to participate in the third Summit for Democracy led by the Republic of Korea. The summit will demonstrate how democracies continue to deliver for their citizens and organize to address the world's most pressing challenges. The Secretary will also meet with Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yul and other Korean officials to discuss a broad range of regional and global issues during his time in Seoul, underscoring the unwavering strength of the more than 70-year U.S. Republic of Korea alliance. From there, Secretary Blinken will travel to Manila to reaffirm our unwavering commitment to our Philippine allies. He will meet with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Secretary of Foreign Affairs Enrique Manalo to discuss ways to advance economic prosperity, support clean and renewable energy development, and promote peace and stability in the South China Sea. The Secretary's visit will also underscore the importance of our strong bilateral ties, which for 75 years have been critical to advancing our shared vision for a free and open, connected, prosperous, secure, and resilient Indo-Pacific region. Now, turning to Israel and the West Bank. Extremist settler violence carried out with impunity in the West Bank has killed, injured, and threatened the livelihoods of countless Palestinian civilians. This violence risks destabilizing the West Bank and obstructs efforts to advance a pathway to peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians through a two-state solution. There is no justification for violence against civilians, no justification for forcing families from their homes. In February, President Biden issued an executive order giving the State Department new authorities to impose sanctions on those responsible for undermining peace, security, and stability in the West Bank, and the department imposed sanctions on 4 individuals. Today, we are imposing further targeted sanctions on 3 Israeli individuals involved in undermining stability in the West Bank. We have also designated 2 associated entities referred to as farms. These West Bank outposts are owned or controlled by designated individuals, have acted as a base from which to launch violent acts, and are illegal even under Israeli law. It is critical that Israel take additional action to stop settler violence and hold accountable those responsible for it, not just for the sake of the victims of this violence, but for Israel's own security and standing in the world. But as we have made clear, the United States will continue to take its own actions to hold accountable those engaging in extremist violence and threatening the peace, security, and stability of the West Bank. This includes through actions like those taken today, through the visa restriction policy announced by Secretary Blinken in December, under which the department has taken steps to impose visa restrictions on dozens of individuals. Finally, the United States condemns Russia's continuing efforts to undermine Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence through sham elections held in occupied Ukrainian territories. The United States does not and will never recognize the legitimacy or outcome of these sham elections held in sovereign Ukraine as part of Russia's presidential elections. To be clear, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea are Ukraine. The results of these Potemkin-style exercises will be dictated by Moscow and cannot reflect the free will of the citizens of Ukraine who are being compelled to vote in them. This spectacle only further demonstrates Russia's blatant disregard for its obligations under international law. The United States will continue to use all available tools to hold accountable those individuals responsible for actions that undermine the sovereignty, territorial integrity, or political independence of free countries, including those who serve as election observers for the Kremlin's sham elections in occupied parts of Ukraine. And with that, Matt.
Right. Thanks.
But sorry, that was so long. I only have time for 2 questions.
Okay. Well, I'll put it all into one question. Decide. I'll start with the 75-year relationship with the Philippines. Are you including the period when the U.S. actually occupied and controlled the Philippines in that?
I would have to go back and look at the exact history of that to give you a more precise answer.
I'm sure you would. Okay, on Gaza. You have seen, I'm sure, Senator Schumer's comments. I know that you can't speak for the senator or any member of Congress. But is there a concern in the administration at all that these remarks are going to make it more difficult to deal with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government?
No, obviously Congress is an independent branch of government. I think the government of Israel understands quite well how the U.S. government works. They interact frequently, not just with members of the executive branch, but with members of Congress, including Senator Schumer, who has traveled to Israel a number of times over the years. And I'm sure that they fully understand that he speaks for himself. He's obviously someone we're in close contact with, but it's not a statement from the executive branch.
Well, fair enough, except that there are members of the executive branch who have said roughly similar, if not exactly the same thing, over the course of the last several months. And so I think there is a suspicion out there that Senator Schumer was putting out publicly what had been being said privately.
No, that is not the case. These are statements made by Senator Schumer, not by the Biden administration.
Okay, so there's no frustration in the administration with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government?
Look, there are a number of things that we want to see Israel do differently. We've made that quite clear. I've said it from this podium, as you know, a number of times, and we've made that quite clear in direct conversations with the Prime Minister. But I don't have anything beyond that.
Okay, thanks.
Julian.
Haiti?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
You told us Tuesday, Matt, that you did not have an estimate on Americans trapped on the ground inside the country. Wondering if you have any information now on Americans there. Also, if there's any plans to evacuate or otherwise help those who are.
So I don't have an estimate of how many Americans are on the ground in Haiti. That's always difficult information for the State Department to have a precise number on, because most Americans, when they travel to a country, and certainly one like Haiti where we have close ties and there are people that go back and forth, they don't register with the United States. They don't register with our embassy to tell us that they are there. So it's impossible for us to know for sure. There are several hundred Americans who have registered to receive more information when we can provide it to them, and we, of course, do provide that information to them, but that's different than an overall number, which is as is the case in most parts of the world. We just aren't able to offer an estimate. With respect to your second question, we always plan for all sorts of contingencies, but no, we are not planning for any. We are not actively planning for any evacuation. And I would remind you and others that Haiti has been a level 4 country with respect to our travel advisors since 2020. So what that means is for 4 years, we have been telling Americans, do not go to Haiti. Do not travel there. It's not safe to do so. And for those who are there, leave as soon as you can feasibly do so without putting yourself at risk.
So you don't anticipate, or put it this way, so no plans to evacuate as of now. Do you anticipate there may be some support for evacuation for those few hundred or however many there are?
We will always provide information to American citizens that reach out to us when we can do so. For example, if there's information about the operations at the airport that becomes available, we'll make that known to Americans who reach out to us. But we are not actively planning for any evacuation, no.
One last question, if I may. With the few $100 million of new aid money that's going to make its way to Haiti, does state have, I guess, guardrails in place to prevent any of that funding falling into the hands of these gangs that are now controlling the government buildings?
So let me, just to be clear and to make sure I answer your question correctly, let me talk about the different types of aid and assistance that we are providing. So first of all, there is $33 million that the Secretary announced on Monday in humanitarian assistance that we are providing to help alleviate the humanitarian situation on the ground. And we always have guardrails in place. We always have monitoring programs in place to ensure that that money is used effectively. There is an additional $300 million that the United States is providing to support the multinational security support mission that Kenya will be launching in the coming days and weeks, which is a separate question from humanitarian assistance, and that is money that will be provided in some cases in kind through transfers of equipment, in some cases through provision of logistics, in some cases through direct financial support, but that is to the government of Kenya to support the multinational support mission, not to the government of Haiti or entities on the ground in Haiti.
So can you do the top line numbers? So total 330 direct from the U.S. and then 300.
Different. There's 300. It's two different things. $300 million in support for the multinational security support mission. $200 million of that is from the Pentagon. $100 million is from here. Separate and apart from that, not supporting the MSS mission, but supporting humanitarian assistance efforts, is the $33 million that the Secretary announced on Monday. Yeah.
For a second. Gaza's health ministry said today that 6 Palestinians were killed and dozens wounded in Israeli fire on crowds of residents waiting for aid trucks in Gaza City. Have you raised this with the Israelis, and do you have any information on this?
So I don't have any information on this specific report. I just saw it today. I can tell you that this is the type of thing that we often raise with the Israelis, both to seek out more information and to make clear that we want to see effective deconfliction measures taken. We want to see them take steps to minimize civilian casualties. We want them to take steps to see that aid is effectively distributed to Palestinian civilians who need it and in no way jeopardized.
And then just further on aid, the Secretary said yesterday when talking about the maritime corridor that it demands tremendous coordinating among donor countries. Is this for the U.S. military effort or the commercial maritime option?
This is with respect to the effort the President announced in the State of the Union, the effort that we are launching with through the United States military and with which we are coordinating with other countries. And as you heard us say, we are working through what that will look like right now, and part of the purpose of the Secretary's ministerial meeting yesterday was to talk through exactly how we get that mission off the ground.
And sorry, just quickly on the settler sanctions, what effect do these sanctions have on the farms? I realize it cuts them off from like the U.S. financial system, but like how will this impact their operations?
So I won't speak to what the exact impact will be on their direct operations, but I can tell you how the sanctions will be imposed and how they will be enforced. So for both the individuals we sanctioned today and the two entities, any property that they have in the United States or in United States financial accounts is blocked. They no longer will have access to it, and they no longer have the ability to transact with the U.S. financial system. And then on top of that, any entities that transact with the United States financial transaction system, which of course is most entities in the world, banks and other entities, put themselves at risk of further sanctions and further enforcement activities from the United States if they transact with these farms and with these entities. So what we've seen when we announced our first round of sanctions under this new executive order last month is in Israel, Israeli banks freezing the accounts of the 4 previously designated individuals. And I won't make any predictions what will happen going forward, but I know that every entity around the world takes these sanctions very seriously.
And why go ahead with them now? Is it because there's not been progress in talks for a temporary ceasefire?
This is completely independent of the ongoing effort to achieve a temporary ceasefire and release of the hostages. We continue to pursue that. There continues to be ongoing work inside the United States government and with our partners in the region to try to achieve an agreement, but this work is independent of that. We have made clear for some time that we wanted to see Israel take additional action to, number one, stop extremist settler violence, and number two, hold those responsible for it accountable. And we made clear that if we didn't see sufficient steps, we were ready to take action. And that's why you saw us first impose visa bans in December. Next, the president issue this executive order in February, and now us continuing to add designated entities to the list of those that we have sanctioned. And I will just say, This is an area where we are going to continue to remain vigilant, and if additional actions are appropriate, we will not hesitate to take them.
On Israel, thank you, Matt. I just want to follow up on something that Matt raised. Separately from Senator Schumer's remarks, there was this week released an unclassified American intelligence community assessment that indicated that Israel was likely to face lingering armed resistance from Hamas for years to come, that its military would struggle to secure the tunnel systems in Gaza, and it also said that the viability of Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership and coalition may be in jeopardy. Do those assessments comport with this department's view of the situation? And if so, is the department going to reach for partners other than Netanyahu in its diplomatic efforts?
So a few things about that. Number one, with respect to any assessment offered by the intelligence community, I'm going to defer to the intelligence community to speak to those. That's true here. It's true with respect to any other intelligence assessment that they offer publicly. I will say that we have always made clear to Israel that it is important that they have not just a short-term tactical plan or short-term plan to win the initial conflict, but that they have a long-term plan for dealing with the issues raised in this war, that they have a plan for governance in Gaza after the initial fighting stops, that they have a plan for security in Gaza after the fighting stops. Now, we have been working with Arab partners in the region to develop such a plan that would deal with security, that would deal with reconstruction, that would deal with a political path forward for the Palestinian people. And we have made it clear to Israel that these are incredibly important issues that they need to take seriously.
And on the question of, first, let me just push you on the intelligence front, because the State Department has its own intelligence arm in INR. So did the assessment draw an objection from within this building? Was there a differing view from within this building?
I'm not going to speak to internal intelligence matters. I never would do, and you shouldn't. You should. I know, but you shouldn't read that anything into it other than it's just a blanket rule that I'm not going to talk to that. Obviously, we coordinate with others in the intelligence community, but this is an assessment offered initially by the DNI, and I'm not going to speak to the internal deliberations that went into it.
So you won't address the Netanyahu's coalition being potentially in jeopardy assessment either?
I just don't have any comment on it from here.
Just as an additional, unnamed officials as a result of these assessments within Israel have accused the U.S. government of trying to oust the prime minister. Do you care to respond to those?
So with respect to that, I would say that this is an intelligence community assessment, similar to assessments that the intelligence community offers from time to time, not about Israel, but about countries all around the world. It has nothing to do with trying to take a position in internal Israeli matters or take a position in internal Israeli politics. We do not have a position on that. Who leads the government of Israel is a matter for the Israeli public to decide, just as that is a matter for the residents of any country to decide with respect to the leadership of their country. We deal with the elected prime minister. We will always deal with the elected leadership of Israel. That will always be our policy.
Okay, one last one on hostage talks, because you mentioned there was ongoing work. Is it the case that the stakeholders surrounding the talks are just waiting for a response from Hamas, or is there a revised offer being put on the table?
I'm not going to get into any level of detail other than to say that there continues to be an offer on the table to Hamas, as you heard the secretary say when he was at this podium yesterday, that we think they should accept. Kylie, and welcome back. I know the secretary said it yesterday, but from you, welcome back.
It's good to be here. Sorry to beat a dead horse, but I do have one more question on the Netanyahu remarks, specifically what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said. I understand that you're not going to, talk about if you guys coordinated or anything like that. The White House did say that they were given a heads up ahead of those remarks, but
we did not coordinate. We were given a heads up, but we did not coordinate.
Okay, but he called for a new election in Israel. Can you just clearly say if the administration agrees that this is time for a new election or not in Israel?
That is just not a position that we have taken.
So you won't take a position either way as to if you agree with those remarks or not?
No, they are remarks that he made, and he, as I said, Congress is an independent branch of government.
But do you think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is in strong standing right now as the leader of Israel?
I am not going to offer any type of assessment of that. He is the elected Prime Minister of Israel.
Okay.
Yeah, Said, go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. Very quickly on the Netanyahu, Chuck Schumer thing. I know, Congress is a separate entity and so on, but do you agree that Mr. Netanyahu is an obstacle to peace when it comes to the two-state solution, considering that he said that time and again?
I, once again, am just not going to offer any independent assessments about the government of Israel. I think I've made that fairly clear. I will make clear what our positions are with respect to a two-state solution. We have made that very clear for some time, but with respect to assessments about the government of Israel, that's not something I'm going to do from this podium.
All right. Now, Israel says it plans, it's been reported that Israel, in fact, it was reported by AP, that Israel plans to direct Palestinians out of Rafah ahead of anticipated offensive. I mean, is that really acceptable? I mean, are they a herd of cattle? You keep moving them north, south, and so on. You keep moving them from place to place. They're going to put them in, like they call them, human islands and so on.
So,
Is that really acceptable to the government of the United States?
so I saw the comments. What I have yet to see, and what our government has yet to see, is a plan from the government of Israel. So before I pass any sort of judgment, we are going to continue to do what we have said we would do, which is look for the government of Israel to provide a plan about how they would address the humanitarian situation in Rafah. Absent having seen such a plan and seeing that such a plan is credible and can be executed and implemented, that type of operation is not one that we could support. But while we saw the comments at a press conference, that's different from a plan, and we've yet to see a plan.
Yeah. But in principle, I mean, the notion of moving people like this, keep moving them endlessly. I don't know for how long. Maybe this war will take another 6 months and so on. Is that something that's fine with you?
Yes, with respect, I will wait to see. I will wait to see a plan.
Let me ask you on UNRWA, if I may. Can I ask you on UNRWA?
Of course.
Okay. Yesterday it was struck, and the secretary mentioned that an UNRWA warehouse, whatever, it was struck, and one person was killed. Now, it has also been reported that Israel is planning, or has begun, in fact, to dismantle. I asked you about this a couple of days ago, to dismantle UNRWA, not only in Gaza but also in the West Bank. Now, would the United States, come out and say, look, we will have whatever punishment fit the crime? If it's proven that staff members of UNRWA have participated in the October 7th attack, then we will hold them accountable on that level. But you make a commitment to continue to keep aiding UNRWA?
So, Saeed, I do appreciate your continued insistence that I put the cart before the horse and pass judgment on matters that remain open and on which we have not yet been provided the information we said we would have to have before we could pass judgment. But just as I would not pass judgment with respect to a Rafah plan that we have not seen, I'm not going to pass judgment on the outcome of an investigation that is still ongoing. What I will do is make clear what our principles are, which is that we think the allegations against UNRWA need to be investigated thoroughly. They are being investigated. We are waiting for the outcome of that investigation. But none of that changes the fact that right now, UNRWA plays a critical role on the ground in distributing humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians. And we will wait with respect to our funding decisions, the outcome of that investigation, before we make further ones.
But, you have been all along, since its creation, you have been the major supporter of UNRWA. UNRWA will probably find it difficult to continue without U.S. support. Why can't the U.S. say, we will continue to support you? You keep saying...
Because there's an investigation that's ongoing into very serious allegations, and we want to see what that investigation finds. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Two questions. I'll follow up on Saeed's in the second question. But the UN said, and I'm just going to quote just to be accurate, so the UN said that the number of children reported killed in just over 4 months in Gaza is higher than the number of children killed in 4 years of wars around the world combined. That's a quote from the UN. So what will the U.S. do to make sure that this statistics is not going to get worse in the next few months?
So first of all, it is an almost unspeakable tragedy, the number of children that have died. It is an unacceptable outcome of the fighting of the past 5 months. And you heard the president speak to this over the weekend. We don't want to see another child die. We didn't want to see any children die, obviously. And that's why we have been engaged with the government of Israel to make clear that they need to do everything possible to minimize civilian casualties, and why we have made clear that with respect to any operation in Rafah, we need to see a credible and executable humanitarian assistance plan before we could support one going forward.
Okay, on UNRWA, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the U.S. is holding any funds or resuming the funds until the results of the investigation is concluded. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. According to my information of talking to UN officials, they're saying basically that Israel never provided an evidence to show these 12 members are involved. And therefore, as long as Israel does not provide this evidence, the investigation is still open and can be open for years to come. So in a way, they indicating could be a political, actually, accusation more than an actual one. And even if it's an actual one, it can be political. So where do we go from there? Because, you know, following up with everything else that was said, UNRWA was created to cater for Palestinian refugees only. And the Israelis has always showed their contempt to UNRWA. And now they're saying that 12 members were involved without giving any evidence. My understanding is they give only
All right,
oral,
so
orally they convey the message, but no evidence.
There's a few things about that. So, number one, I can't speak for the United Nations with respect to its investigation. Only they can do so, obviously. But they have communicated directly to us that they have the ability to conduct a thorough investigation in this, and we have confidence in their ability to do that, especially with respect to the former French foreign minister with whom Secretary has a long-standing working relationship. We have confidence in their ability to investigate these allegations. But second of all, and that maybe even more importantly, I think you have to remember why we made our decision to pause funding in the first place. It was not because of allegations that the government of Israel brought to us. We hadn't heard from the government of Israel about these allegations. It was about allegations that UNRWA brought to us. And when they brought us these allegations, they told us that they had investigated them and found them to be credible, and that's why they had taken action to fire the employees in question. So I don't know what your sources refer to with respect to the inability to get further information, but when we made our initial decision to pause funding, not a final decision, but initial, it was because UNRWA had come to us and told us they found these allegations to be credible, they had conducted an initial investigation, and they had taken action. So that seemed to be us to be a pretty credible source. Not allegations from Israel, but UNRWA itself saying the allegations were serious enough to take action. But with respect to the ongoing investigation, we do have faith in their ability to get to the bottom of what happened.
Sure, I really appreciate it. Just like finally, I really want to get to the bottom of this because, again, my understanding that UNRWA reported as a credible information just because a member state of the UN, which is Israel, reported it, not because they found a credible evidence.
That is not.
Because they are a member state and they have to investigate.
That is not what was communicated to the United States when they first brought it. But let me just come back to a broader question, which is something Saeed said, which is the United States has been the largest funder of UNRWA since, I don't know if it's since the beginning, but certainly going back for decades, we have been the largest funder of UNRWA. We are the largest funder of humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people. That commitment on behalf of the United States to continue funding humanitarian assistance remains, and you can count on it from this administration. And you don't just have to look at my words standing here at the podium. You don't just have to look at what Secretary Blinken said when he was here yesterday, but look at the budgets that President Biden has submitted to Congress. In the supplemental budget that is pending right now in Congress, we have requested billions of dollars in humanitarian assistance that would be used to deliver food and water and medicine to the Palestinian people, and that's because we believe it's important. In the budget that was request that was just submitted to Congress on Monday by this administration, we requested billions of dollars in humanitarian assistance to deliver items to the Palestinian people that they desperately need. So now, yes, there is a question with respect to UNRWA because of these allegations that UNRWA deemed credible and took action on, and because of the ongoing investigation. But when it comes to our commitment to providing humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people, there should be no question because we have put our money where our mouth is. Alex, go ahead.
Thank you, Matt. A couple of questions. I want to go back to your opening statement on Russian sham elections. You said.
Yeah, let's stay in the region. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, Alex. On the maritime corridor, Matthew, for how long will it be set in Gaza? And then will it help in evacuating Palestinians from Gaza, or its main goal is only to bring in aid to Gaza?
So the primary purpose of this maritime mechanism is to deliver humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian people in Gaza. With respect to specific questions about how it will operate, what it will do, I would refer to the Department of Defense, which is the lead agency. It is a military, it is intended as a military mechanism at this time, being operated by the military to deliver humanitarian assistance. We are playing a diplomatic role in helping get it off the ground and secure support from allies and partners, but with respect to its specific operations, I would defer to the Pentagon.
And secondly, on reports that the Palestinian president intends to appoint his economic advisor, Mohammed Mustafa, to the post of prime minister. Do you support such an appointment?
I don't have any comment on those reports. We have not seen them take an official action, so I wouldn't comment on speculative reports.
And I have one more question on Iran, but maybe after.
We'll finish up Israel, and then we can do the broader region. Go ahead. If this is Israel related. Yeah, you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know. Yeah.
No, yeah. Well, happy Pi Day to all who celebrate. Question one is about the children in Gaza. Thousands of kids have been killed in Gaza. There's reports of crippling mental health conditions among all Palestinians, kids no less. Kids as young as 5 saying that they want to take their own lives. If a child in Gaza is still alive at this point, their development and education has been interrupted, their homes destroyed, their families and friends killed. So I'm wondering how the U.S. is thinking about supporting these kids who are still alive. And then secondarily, I'm wondering if there's any concern that this war may actually foment an entire generation to see Israel, and by virtue of its aid, the U.S. as more negatively and as entities to resist. As in, is there a fear that this war and this suffering might make harmony harder to achieve?
So let me speak first to the impact on children, which obviously is a tragedy for those who have lost their lives and their family members. And I'm sure it will have dramatic impacts to those who do survive this war. And it's one of the reasons we are trying to achieve a humanitarian ceasefire that would alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people, including children. I know that it's important to everyone here, especially to all of us who have our own kids and think about them when we see what happens in Gaza. And so we are going to continue to try to pursue it and achieve that kind of ceasefire, because it would be important to alleviate that suffering. And longer term, we will continue to try to get humanitarian assistance in to help the Palestinian people rebuild their lives. And then with respect to the broader question, so I would say if you look at the testimony that the Director of National Intelligence gave the other day to Congress, she spoke quite directly on this issue. And I would refer you to her comments, with which, and would, on behalf of the State Department, wholeheartedly endorse them.
And then on the investigations, we've talked about before the allegations of Israel killing journalists, of people like Hind Rajab, her family, the medics sent to save her, allegations now of torture and sexual abuse. On these and more, the U.S. often defers to Israel to investigate and, checks in periodically. But for how much longer will the U.S. continue to defer to Israel, given that, they kind of continue to reportedly commit the same violations? To put a finer point on it, for our colleague in the front row's question on attacks on food lines, after the attack 2 weeks ago, where at least 100 people were killed and nearly 800 were injured waiting for food. Since then, Israeli forces have reportedly killed more than 400 Palestinians in food lines since that attack. So I know that attack is being investigated, but how much longer can we keep sort of deferring as these violations continue to keep happening?
So I will say, with respect to any matter, we want to see it investigated. We want to see it investigated promptly and, if appropriate, see accountability. And that's what we will continue to press the government of Israel to do. But that's not the only thing we do when it comes to these questions. We also press them to take measures to keep it from happening again. And in some areas we have seen improvements. In other areas there is clearly more work to be done. But it does come back to this, this thing we have talked about before, which is the difficulty of operating in this environment where Hamas continues to use Palestinians as human shields. So I will just say, with respect to the strike that Israel took yesterday that has reportedly killed an UNRWA worker. So the IDF put out a statement on that today and said that they were targeting a Hamas terrorist, and they've released video that they claim shows the death of a Hamas terrorist that they were specifically targeting, who has been stealing humanitarian assistance intended for innocent civilians and diverting it to Hamas and diverting it to the terrorists who not only killed more than 1,200 Israelis on October 7th and killed American citizens on October 7th, and not only continue to hold hostages, including American citizens, but continue to put Palestinian civilians in harm's way. and who could, at least for 6 weeks, end this conflict today by accepting the ceasefire proposal that's on the table. So it is a very difficult environment in which Israel operates that in no way alleviates their need to minimize civilian casualties. And what I can tell you is that we will continue to press them to do everything they can to minimize civilian harm. Go ahead. Go ahead, and then we'll come to you, Alex.
Palestinian children. So on Tuesday, a 12-year-old Palestinian child, Rami, was killed by an Israeli police officer in East Jerusalem. He was lighting fireworks in front of his family home, playing with his brother and his friends. And Israeli National Security Minister Ben Gvir praised the police officer who shot Rami as a hero and called the 12-year Palestinian boy a terrorist. What is your reaction to this?
You know, it's hard to know how to react to that specific comment. I will say that no child just out doing what a child does should be put in harm's way and should see their life put at risk. No child out playing should be harmed in any way. And I can tell you this is a matter that we will seek information about the government of Israel.
Haven't you raised this with the Israeli government?
We may have. I wasn't aware of this report until you raised it to me right before the briefing. I haven't had a chance to talk to our embassy, but I can tell you if we have not, we will.
And I mean, we know that Israel is we heard from the news that Israel is investigating this, but you know, how can we believe that Israel will investigate itself impartially when its national security minister calling a child?
So it is important that we watch these investigations and hold them accountable, that the Israeli press watch them and ask questions, and that the rest of the world's press watch them and have questions. And this goes back to something you have heard me say before, that Israel is a democracy where the free press can ask questions, where citizens can demand that their government do better and perform better, and where the rest of the world can interact with them and ask those very same questions. And that's what we will do on behalf of the United States, and would encourage others to do it as well. All right, Alex, we'll finally come to you.
Thanks so much. It's been an eventful week, as I understand. Back to your opening statement on Ukraine and Russia. You said the United States does not and will never recognize the outcome of sham elections. Context matters, of course. You're talking about Ukrainian sovereignty here, but how much of these questions Putin's legitimacy, in your opinion?
So I think it very clearly shows that he disrespects international law. And as I said, there is no legitimacy with respect to his claims for Ukraine, either the territory where they are holding these sham elections right now, or the rest of Ukraine where he continues to have designs.
But in terms of the election that Putin is running this time, the United States will not recognize Putin as an elected president next week. Is that
look, I think when it comes to the elections in Russia, first of all, the Russian people deserve free and fair elections and the ability to choose among candidates representing diverse views. They deserve access to impartial information. If you just look back at what we've seen over the past few weeks, we saw the Kremlin's leading critic, Alexei Navalny, die in custody following years of harassment and abuse. We've seen the Russian government attack one of his longtime aides, and we've seen them continue to deny anti-war candidates registration on spurious grounds and deprive Russian voters of genuine choices. So we have seen the Russian government, not just over the past months in the lead up to this election, but of course for years, crack down on the ability of Russian civil society to operate, the ability of independent journalists to exercise their legitimate rights, and of course the ability of the Russian citizens to speak clearly. We will watch the election, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to say when it concludes.
Yeah, as for attack that you're referring to, Lithuania's counterintelligence said that they assessed that the Kremlin was behind it. The Russian intelligence service carried out this attack. Is that your understanding?
I don't have any comment on from it here. I'm happy to take it back and see if we have any further.
I was hoping you could help us understand.
One more, and then I'll go.
Yeah, thanks so much. The state's role in the latest aid package for Ukraine. The president signed a memorandum the very same day that you guys put out $300 million for Ukraine. and he directed the secretary to furnish up to 126 million from the FAA for Ukraine. Is it a separate package? Are you guys working on it, or is it
Let me
going to
take
be
that.
announced?
Let me take that back and get you
Skip.
an answer on it. Go ahead.
Okay, so on Monday, CARICOM meets, comes up with this plan for a presidential council in Haiti. It's now Thursday. Is the council being stood up?
My understanding is that just in the last few hours, a number of the entities that will comprise the transitional council have submitted their names, and so we will continue to work with CARICOM and work with our international partners and work first and foremost with Haitians themselves on trying to pursue a path to return of democracy and free and fair elections in Haiti.
Not surprisingly, there is some objection from some parties, particularly in Port-au-Prince, setting aside the armed groups that have essentially taken control of the city. What efforts is the United States taking on to try to get people to buy into this transitional process?
So a few things about that. First of all, what we saw Monday was dozens of Haitian individuals, representatives of political organizations in Haiti, civil society groups, being willing to make concessions and being willing to make compromises to try to restore stability and set the path to free and fair elections. And we think that's appropriate, and I think that's something that all political figures in Haiti should do to try to move past the current crisis. But with respect to your question about what the United States is trying to do, I think it is a mistake. I'm not trying to quibble with you. It's a mistake to look at this as what the United States will do, because ultimately this is a matter for the Haitian people to decide, and the Haitian people and Haitian leaders need to be front and center in making decisions about their country. What we will do is work with Haitian leaders and work with CARICOM leaders and work with our other international partners to do everything we can to offer support for Haitians in making those concessions and trying to get on the path to democracy. And separately, but important to this political pathway, we will support the multilateral, multinational security support mission because it is critical to restoring security on the ground. And without security, it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, to hold free and fair elections.
Is there a concern in this building that momentum might be ebbing because we're now 72 hours past this situation? And what happens if, for whatever reason, the names that have been put forward are rejected? What is the plan B? So,
first of all, I'm not going to discuss hypotheticals and what might happen. I would never do that. With respect to anything, as others in this room have heard me say for the last few days, when I've gotten other hypothetical questions, but no, not a concern about momentum ebbing. This was always going to be a political process that required people to make compromises and people to make concessions. As you just heard me say, just in the past few hours, we've seen a number of names submitted for this Presidential Transitional Council. We want to see it get off the ground as soon as possible. We want to see an interim prime minister appointed as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. A couple questions on Iraq. The U.S. sanctions waiver to Iraq expires in the coming weeks. I've learned that this administration renewed that waiver to the Iraq that could pay to Iran. And in the past few waivers, Iran get monies from Iraq in euros, not in Iraqi dinars. Have you renewed that waiver to Iraq? And why are you allowing Iraq to pay Iran in euros?
So first of all, with respect to which currency it's paid in, I don't know or have any understanding of which currency. With respect to the waiver itself, yes, we did issue this waiver, and I would emphasize, as you've heard me before, that these are waivers that have been regularly issued to Iraq going back to 2018 under a previous administration. This is now the 21st time that this particular waiver has been issued, and it's important to realize how this money has been used. Number one, that no money is permitted to enter Iran under the terms of this waiver. All of these funds are held in restricted accounts, and they can only be used for transactions for the purchase of food, medicine, medical devices, agricultural products, and other non-sanctionable transactions. And that it is part of our broader goal to wean Iraq off of dependence on Iran for the provision of electricity, because that's what these waivers, as I know you know, what these waivers relate to, which is that Iraq continues to have to get its electricity from Iran. Iraq has been making real progress on its path towards energy sufficiency. Since 2020, it has cut its imports of Iranian energy by more than half. Over the last decade, it has doubled its own electricity generation, and we will continue to work with them and support them as they try to become energy independent.
And this week, 4 members of Congress sent a letter to Secretary Allen and Secretary Blinken on that issue, and they speak of the nature of that transactions. They mentioned that these transactions are fungible. If these transactions are fungible, so don't you think that you are keep maintaining the financial lifeline for Iran, and the Iran continues to keep supporting those groups that you listed in FTO?
Not at all, and we've addressed this in the past. Not only is it not our assessment that that's not how this money is used, but it's not what we have seen during the provision of this waiver in the past. And again, this is not just a decision that has been made by this secretary. It is a decision that was made by a previous secretary appointed by a previous president in the administration immediately preceding ours. What we have seen, and this is borne out time and time again, is that Iran is always going to fund terrorism. It's always going to fund destabilizing activities. That is the first item it commits to when Iran is going through whatever budget process it is that Iran goes through. And that this money helps the Iranian people because it can only be used for humanitarian purposes and other non-sanctionable goods. In other words, it is additive money that would otherwise not be spent to address the Iranian people's legitimate needs as opposed to the Iranian government's illegitimate purposes. And with respect to those illegitimate activities by the Iranian government, you have seen this administration respond to those. We have imposed sanctions on more than 500 Iranian entities since the outset of this administration. We have held Iran accountable for its support of terrorism and its funding of dangerous proxy groups around the region, and we'll continue to do so. Gita, go ahead.
Thanks, Matt. Talking about the Iranian people, you may recall the results of the UN fact-finding mission on the government suppression of the protests, which basically said in most cases crimes against humanity had been committed. Now, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, based on that report, is urging the Biden administration to support a UN Security Council referral to the International Criminal Court. Given what you just said about support for the Iranian people and holding the government accountable, would the Biden administration consider this proposition seriously as a means to that end of holding the regime accountable?
So the UN fact-finding mission did document extremely concerning human rights abuses, which it included may amount to crimes against humanity. We strongly support the resolution under consideration at the UN Human Rights Council that renews mandates for the fact-finding mission and the special rapporteur on human rights in Iran for another year. And with respect to the other question, I don't have anything to announce today.
Okay. Another, somewhat in the same light, the Iranian government has also been persecuting athletes. Now, with the upcoming Olympics in Paris, Senator Marsha Blackburn has written to the International Olympic Committee and asked not to allow the Iranian team in. Any comments on that? Do you think that's another way of possibly holding the Iranian regime accountable?
So we certainly agree that Iran's ongoing human rights abuses are horrific. As I just said, we saw the UN fact-finding mission's conclusions with respect to possible crimes against humanity. I don't have anything to announce with respect to the Paris Olympics today, but we continue to look at and pursue numerous ways to respond to the Iranian regime's abuse of its citizens. Go ahead. No.
U.S. Congressional Committee holding its hearing next week on the fairness of Pakistan's elections. Assistant Secretary Donald Lu has been asked to testify before the committee. What is your reaction on the announcement of this hearing, and will its findings have any impact on U.S.-Pakistan relations?
So with respect to the hearing, any number of State Department officials testify all the time before Congress. We see it as an important part of our jobs to help Congress do its job, both from a policy-making perspective and from an oversight perspective. So we always look forward both to the informal conversations we have with Congress, the formal conversations, and of course, the actual testimony that our officials provide.
So as you know that former Prime Minister Imran Khan and his supporters alleged that Assistant Secretary Donald Lu threatened to destabilize his government during the March 2022 meeting with the Pakistani ambassador. And according to media reports, after his allegations, Imran Khan's allegations, few members of his party sent some threatening messages to Mr. Donald Lu. So those members might be, maybe, because it's an open hearing, they might be there. So do you have any concerns on security of Mr. Donald Lu in that hearing?
So first of all, with respect to the underlying allegations against Assistant Secretary Lu, they're false. They've always been false. You've heard me say that more than once, more than twice, more than 10 times probably. Of course, we take any threats towards U.S. officials seriously and condemn any effort to threaten the safety and security of our diplomats.
One last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Sir, India has implemented a controversial citizenship law that has been widely criticized for excluding Muslims. Establishes a religious test for migrants from every major South Asian faith other than Islam. So do you have any comments on this in relation to discussion about religious freedom?
So we are concerned about the notification of the Citizenship Amendment Act on March 11. We are closely monitoring this act, how this act will be implemented. Respect for religious freedom and equal treatment under the law for all communities are fundamental democratic principles. Daphne, and then we'll stop for the day. Wrap for the
Can I
day.
just get back to the waiver quickly? It's the waiver allowing Iraq to pay Iran for electricity, right?
It's a simplification of it, but it is the way it works. Iraq has been importing electricity from Iran. It doesn't pay Iran directly for that electricity. It deposits money into these restricted accounts, and then when we issue these waivers, it allows the money in those accounts to be used for humanitarian and other non-sanctionable purposes. But the money itself doesn't actually move from Iraq to Iran.
Right, and then was it issued for another 120 days?
Yes, it's a standard period.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Perfect. All right. All right. So we have good evening, Fran. All right. 3, 2, 1. Good evening, Fran. The National Kidney Foundation says that about 90% of those with kidney disease don't know they have it, and that's why those we spoke with say it's so important to raise awareness about the disease.
I walked into the doctor's office thinking I had the flu, and was told at the time both of my kidneys had shut down.
Anthony Tuggle received a kidney transplant nearly 25 years ago. Kidney diseases are a leading cause of death in the United States, according to the CDC, with more than 1 in 7 U.S. adults having chronic kidney disease or CKD.
And the message that we need to get out is people need to know their kidney health. It's not a normal conversation you have with your doctor. You don't ask your doctor, how's my kidneys doing?
CKD happens when the kidneys are damaged and lose their ability to keep you healthy by filtering waste and toxins from your blood.
Kidney disease is a silent disease, so by the time you develop symptoms, you really are in kidney failure, and it's an irreversible damage.
Dr. Sylvia Rosas says early detection and action are key, like diet, exercise, medications, and treating risk factors such as diabetes and high blood pressure. But once kidneys fail, dialysis or a transplant is needed.
Transplantation is the only therapy right now that gives you your kidney function back.
As for Anthony,
my current kidney has lasted 24 years and about 10 months, and it recently failed 2 weeks ago.
He's now back on dialysis and the transplant list.
I'm going to be out front and share this journey with everyone with hopes that someone will hear my journey and learn from it.
And here in the U.S., 1 in 3 adults is at risk for kidney disease. In Washington, Mike Oshita, WECT News. Okay. Were you hearing me? Like, the package, at least, I don't know, on this end was super. Oh, you didn't have it up. Okay, cool. Perfect. I have got you. You got me? Two minutes. All right. Sounds good. Hey, good afternoon, Rachel. And the National Kidney Foundation says about 90% of those with kidney disease don't even know they have it. And that's why those we spoke with say it's so important to raise awareness about this disease.
I walked into the doctor office thinking I had the flu and was told at the time both of my kidneys had shut down.
Anthony Tuggle received a kidney transplant nearly 25 years ago. Kidney diseases are a leading cause of death in the United States, according to the CDC, with more than 1 in 7 U.S. adults having chronic kidney disease or CKD.
And the message that we need to get out is people need to know their kidney health. It's not a normal conversation you have with your doctor. You don't ask your doctor, how's my kidneys doing?
CKD happens when the kidneys are damaged and lose their ability to keep you healthy by filtering waste and toxins from your blood.
Kidney disease is a silent disease. So by the time you develop symptoms, you really are in kidney failure, and it's an irreversible damage.
Dr. Sylvia Rosas says early detection and action are key, like diet, exercise, medications, and treating risk factors such as diabetes and high blood pressure. But once kidneys fail, dialysis or a transplant is needed.
Transplantation is the only therapy right now that gives you your kidney function back.
As for Anthony,
my current kidney has lasted 24 years and about 10 months, and it recently failed 2 weeks ago.
He's now back on dialysis and the transplant list.
I'm going to be out front and share this journey with everyone with hopes that someone will hear my journey and learn from it.
And here in the United States, 1 in 3 adults is at risk for kidney disease. Rachel, back to you. Yeah, preventive care and early detection, that's really the key according to the doctor we spoke with, and that's really what this awareness campaign is all about, making that kind of a common conversation and question you have with your doctors during your routine visits. When it comes to testing, there are 2 relatively quick tests you can take, one being a urine test, another being a blood test. Those can check, again, for possible damage to your kidneys, so then you have that awareness and can start taking steps, again, to make it last as long as you can. Back to you. Thank you. All right, thank you. Oh, yeah. I always forget about that. All right. All right. 3, 2, 1. According to the National Kidney Foundation, around 90% of those with kidney disease don't even know they have it. And that's why those we spoke with say it's so important to raise awareness about the disease. 3, 2, 1. And here in the United States, 1 in 3 adults is at risk for kidney disease. In Washington, I'm Michael Yoshida. All right, thank you.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you so much. Thank you, press. Let's head back to the cars. Thank you. Back to the cars. Thank you. Thank you, press. We're happy to walk you all. Vehicles are this way. Thank you. All good. All good. Thank you so much. Thank you. We gotta go. Thank you. Thank you, press. We gotta.
out there to protect our freedoms, because without their work, our freedoms are in jeopardy. So I want to thank you for being here. We have a lot of work to do. We've done a lot of work in this state. We've welcomed a lot of women who have been in crisis into this state to have their reproductive freedoms taken care of, but we have more work to do. And so with that, I'm here to thank you for all you do, all you'll continue to do. And with that, it's getting close to having the person you came here to see out here. So I want to thank you for being such a warm and wonderful audience. So are you fired up? Are you ready to go? Okay, thank you.
Let it go. Can't let
Biden has picked California Senator Kamala Harris to be his running mate.
She is now the first woman, first African American, and first.
He refused to defend the same-sex marriage ban. She performed the vows for the first couple in San Francisco.
Kamala, as you all know, is smart, she's tough, she's experienced, she's a proven fighter for the backbone of this country.
You can trust her because she has been doing the work. She has been doing the heavy lifting. She has been there for you, whether you know it or not.
When it's mattered most, Vice President Harris has provided the decisive vote on some of the most historic bills of modern times.
It's not just about her being the first, but that she very much intends to open the doors for everyone behind her.
VP Harris represents change. She represents dreams that have been fulfilled.
Now let me introduce to you Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Please welcome Janet Jimenez, a fellow at the Women's Foundation.
Everybody, I know I'm not who you were expecting to come out yet, but I'm super happy to be here and everybody that is here, so I'm going to make this brief for you. Hello everybody, my name is Janet Jimenez. I'm a first daughter in my family to go to college. This past December, I graduated a semester early from the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. And this summer, I will be crossing the stage to get my diploma. I have two younger sisters who are following my path, not in the same way, but in their own special ways. And I've been able to encourage them to pursue their dreams and careers. The push that I gave them paid off, and now they will be going off to college in full rights, and I'm very, very proud of them. And today, I have the honor to introduce a true breaker of barriers, Vice President Kamala Harris. Vice President Harris is a trailblazer who has been a historic first throughout her career. The first Black woman in district attorney in California, the first Black woman to be a California Attorney General, the first senator of South Asian descent, and now the first woman, the first Black American, and the first Asian American to serve as Vice President. She opens the door for us. She empowers us to step into the room and be ourselves, to use our voice and make decisions. And this is exactly what we'll do this November. So please please join me and give me the Minnesota Women for Biden welcome to the first, but certainly not the least, Vice President Kamala Harris.
We do what we do, right? Hello, Minnesota, and happy Women's History Month. And to Janet, I want to thank you for that introduction and the inspiration. She and I were talking backstage. I mean, I love our young leaders. And our youngish leaders, and all of us. But she and I were talking. I mean, there's so much about what we are all fighting for that is truly about her and about all of our young leaders who are here. And we are in this together. It is multi-generational. It is multi-everything. And we are a community of people who understand that nobody should be made to fight alone. So it is good to be back in Minnesota. I want to thank Governor Tim Walz and the mayor who are here. And Madam Speaker, all of the leaders who are here, and thank you for welcoming me back to St. Paul. I want to thank everyone, including, of course, the Majority Leader, Murphy, who I believe is also here, for your leadership. So the victories that you all have won, and in particular at the State House, have once again demonstrated to our nation just how much progress a Democratic trifecta can make. I was talking with your leaders backstage, and I said the beauty of this is not only the success that you all have achieved and what has come out of it in terms of how you've organized and activated, but the beauty of it is also for people who can't imagine what a Democratic trifecta can do. We can point to you so those who may have never seen what it could look like can now see how we can empower the people, all people, by doing this good work. We are also joined today by Representative Betty McCollum. There she is. She honored me with traveling with me on Air Force Two from Washington, D.C. here today, and I want to thank you. And Representative Ilhan Omar, who is here, with her beautiful daughter, who is vice president at her school. And the two Congress members are, without any question, extraordinary fighters in Washington, D.C. for the people of this state. Senator Klobuchar, let's give a shout out to her. I talked to her on the way here. She wanted to be here, but she's in Washington, D.C. fighting the good fight. And I did serve with her in the United States Senate for a few years, and I have to tell you, she really is a fighter, and she loves the state and the people of this state. So let us, and also on the subject of Senator Klobuchar, let's make sure we send her back to D.C. We need her there, and she's been a wonderful friend and advisor to the president and me. All right, so my mother had many sayings, and she would often say to me, Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, but make sure you are not the last. So I look at the young leaders here today, and I know I will not be the last. And that makes me so joyful. As Vice President, I will tell you also, I have traveled now to at least 20 countries in every hemisphere of our world. And I do believe, and I think many here know, that a measure of the strength of a democracy is based on the status and standing of the women in that country. You can measure the strength of a democracy by evaluating and assessing the strength and the standing of the women. And with the support of the leaders here, President Joe Biden and I then have been intentional about what we do to lift up the status of the women of our nation. And so let's start with the fact that I think we all know when you lift up the economic status of women, families benefit, communities benefit, and all of society benefits. So today we are together with you building a future where every woman has the economic power to support her family and pursue her dreams. Take on, for example, the issue of student loan debt. Women carry nearly 2/3 of all student loan debt. 2/3. So we have canceled nearly $138 billion in student loan debt for almost 4 million Americans and counting, on average more than $30,000 per person. And for public servants, for example, our teachers, can we give a shout out to our teachers? And I know the governor and congresswoman were former teachers, and I don't think anyone ever stops being a teacher, by the way. And so for public servants like our teachers, and more than 70% of whom are women, the average loan forgiveness is over $60,000. Yeah. Thank you. You know, my first grade teacher attended my law school graduation. I love our teachers. I love our teachers. To lift up the economic status of women, we have invested in women entrepreneurs and small business owners across our nation. Millions of women who want to start or grow a business but do not have the funds to do so. So I've been working on this since I was in the Senate. But to invest now, as an administration, the President and I, billions of dollars to expand access to capital for women, small business owners. To lift up the status of women, President Biden and I have lowered health care costs, in particular, the cost of insulin for our seniors. One-fifth of women over the age of 65 have diabetes. And too many have had to make the choice between filling their prescription or filling their refrigerator. Knowing also that seniors who are women are 80% more likely to live in poverty. Think about that. And we can think of the myriad of reasons why. So President and I have capped the cost of insulin for our seniors at $35 a month. And we capped the entire annual cost of prescription medication to $2,000 a year. And when we win re-election, we're going to cap the cost of prescription medication for everyone. On another subject, Minnesota, can we agree that in the 21st century, it should not be the case that in the United States of America, women die at a higher rate in connection with childbirth than women in any other wealthy nation in the world? It's a shame. And it is a crisis, the crisis of maternal mortality. And of the many factors that contribute to this crisis, one of the most significant is that millions of women in America, in particular low-income women, do not have access to adequate postpartum care. In fact, when we took office, I took a look at it, and the vast majority of American women on Medicaid were entitled to only 2 months of coverage for postpartum care. When we took office, only 3 states in our nation offered 12 months of postpartum care. So many of you know me, so you will not be surprised. I said, all right, I'm going to issue a challenge to every state in our nation. Extend Medicaid postpartum coverage from a measly 2 months to 12 months. And I am proud to report, so far a total of 45 states have now answered the challenge. So all of this, and I could go on, but all of this is to say that over the past 3 years, we have made incredible progress. And we are clear-eyed, even as we fight to lift up the women and all the people of our nation. There are those who are intent on dragging us backward, intent, a full-on agenda that's about taking us back and attacking, full-on attacking hard-fought, hard-won freedoms. The freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from the horror of gun violence, the freedom to be who you are and love who you love openly and with pride, and the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not having her government tell her what to do. So as everyone here knows, almost 2 years ago, the highest court in our land, the Court of Thurgood and RBG, took a constitutional right that had been recognized from the people of America, from the women of America. And since then, in states across our nation, extremists have proposed and passed laws to criminalize healthcare providers and punish women. Laws that threaten doctors and nurses with prison time, even for life. Go to Texas, you'll see that. Simply for doing what? Providing health care. I was at a clinic today with the Congresswoman and Governor. I mean, let's be clear. And the reporter said, well, you've made history, I guess, again, because, I did. And they said, you're the first president or vice president to ever visit a healthcare clinic, an abortion clinic. Why are you here? And I said, because you got to understand, when these laws, when the court took this right away, they created a healthcare crisis in America. So what has happened in so many of these states is these clinics have shut down. And so then I said to the press, and I said, get ready for the words I'm about to use. Uterus, fibroids, pap smears, breast cancer exams. That's part of what these clinics provide. Necessary, vital health care in addition to abortion care. And across the country, thankfully not here because of the strength of all of you, but across the country, they've passed laws making no exception even for rape or incest. You know, many of you know that my background as I started my career as a prosecutor, you may not know why. One of the reasons is that when I was in high school, I learned that my best friend was being molested by her stepfather. And I said to her then, you've got to come and stay with us. I called my mother. My mother said, of course she does. And she came to stay with us. So I decided very early in my life that I wanted to do the work that was about protecting women and children from abuse and violence. The idea that they are proposing and passing laws that make no exception even for rape or incest. So they're saying to a survivor of a crime of violence to their body, a violation to their body, that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next? That's immoral. Immoral. And on the subject overall, I think we all agree, let us all agree, one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. We trust women. We trust women to know what is in their best interest. And today, in some states, we just saw extremists are even attacking the freedom to use IVF treatment. And understand it can happen anywhere. That's an example of it happening. I talked about this when the Dobbs decision was leaked. Let's see where this could end up. So think about it. Women and couples being denied the ability to fulfill their dream of having a child. And consider the irony. So on the one hand, they're saying, you don't have the freedom to end an unwanted pregnancy. And on the other hand, you don't have the freedom to start a family. Consider the irony. And by the way, while these extremists say they are motivated by the well-being of women and children, they are silent on the crisis of maternal mortality. The top 10 states with the highest rates of maternal mortality all have abortion bans. The hypocrisy abounds. And as we know, there is nothing hypothetical about anything we've just discussed. The crisis is real. Since Roe was overturned, I have met women who have had miscarriages in toilets. I had met a woman who went to the emergency room to receive care and was turned away repeatedly because the doctors were afraid that they could go to jail for giving her care, and it wasn't until she developed sepsis. And in this healthcare crisis, let us all recognize who is to blame. The former President Donald Trump handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would overturn Roe. He intended for them to take your freedoms, and he brags about it. He said that for years, and then I'm going to quote, they were trying to get rid of Roe v. Wade. They're trying to have Roe v. Wade terminated, he said. And then he said, quote, I did it, and I'm proud to have done it. Proud. Proud that women across our nation are suffering. Proud that doctors and nurses could be thrown in prison for administering care. Proud that young people today have fewer rights than their mothers and grandmothers. How dare he? The former president is the architect of a healthcare crisis. And the extremists, well, they're not done. In the United States Congress, extremists tried to pass a national abortion ban to outlaw abortion in every single state. But they need to know is that if Congress passes a national abortion ban, President Joe Biden will veto it. He will veto it.
members of the Security Council. They are, in particular, first, threatening to block the adoption of Presidency's monthly programs if there is a scheduled meeting under agenda item Maintenance of Peace and Security of Ukraine in the draft. Over the recent period, there were several cases of blocking the adoption, while in other cases, presidencies opted not to include meetings under the above agenda item to the program and later scheduled such meetings on an ad hoc basis. Second, spamming the agenda with questions that could hardly align with the Council's mandate. For instance, there were a number of meetings requested by the aggressor state where the Security Council's members were supposed to discuss the theological differences among different religious denominations in Ukraine. Third, duplicating Ukraine-related meetings in retaliation when additional meetings were initiated by the Russian Federation on the next day or a couple of days later following those requested by Ukraine or other Council members under agenda item Maintenance of Peace and Security in Ukraine. These hostile practices, which effectively turned the procedures into tools of blackmailing, bargaining, and spreading disinformation, would further undermine the Council's integrity and credibility. We therefore encourage the Council to address the above problems and elaborate a set of measures to prevent further misuse of Council's working methods and procedures. We consider such a set could be included to the next update of the Note 507. It is important to remember that only addressing the root cause of the current immobilization of the Council, notably the presence among its members of the aggressor state, would enable a holistic and comprehensive action to restore the Council's efficacy. Thank you.
Representative of Ukraine for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Lithuania.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to express congratulations to Japan on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month. I also appreciate this opportunity to discuss today the working methods of Security Council. Indeed, as it's most rightly noted in the concept note, it is essential to seek more transparent, efficient, and inclusive approach. To effectively fulfill its primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security, Council must make full use of all experiences and instruments available at its disposal. Inclusive dialogue with non-Council interested and affected member states is essential in this regard. Madam President, the Council must be more efficient in addressing the complex and interconnected threats to peace and security that we collectively face. Consequently, we need the Council to function in a manner that optimizes its mandate. The illegal, unprovoked, and unjustified war against Ukraine waged by Russia clearly exposed the structural and procedural weaknesses of this body. The abuse of the veto power illustrates how the permanent member of the Security Council, Russia, continues to hold the Security Council hostage. Lithuania highlights that the veto power should be constrained under the Article 27, Para 3 of the UN Charter, which requires a party to a dispute to abstain from voting. We remain steadfast supporters of efforts to limit the use of the veto, particularly in situations of mass atrocity, and encourage all delegations to commit to the accountability, coherence, and transparency code of conduct and support the French-Mexican initiative. We once again thank Liechtenstein for its leadership in enhancing transparency and accountability regarding the use of veto. The adoption of the United Nations General Assembly resolution standing mandate for a General Assembly debate when the veto is cast in the Security Council during the 77th session marks a significant and overdue step. We trust that this measure will improve Council's deliberations and decisions in the long term. Furthermore, the Council's debate on Ukraine, Russia and some other members of the Security Council deliberately oppose and aim at obstructing the implementation of Rule 37 of the Council's provisional rule, an indispensable provision aimed at eliciting the perspectives of all impacted member states. This resistance underscores the rigid opposition to the established norms of the collaboration and cooperation. Madam President, we encourage the Council to strengthen its engagement with the broader UN membership, focusing on increased transparency in its operations. This includes providing more opportunities for the General Assembly members, on whose behalf the Security Council acts, to engage with its work. Unhindered implementation of Rule 37 of the Council's provisional rules must be ensured, particularly when discussing aggression in violation of the UN Charter. It is essential to maintain the various tools available to the Security Council for effectiveness while promoting greater interaction with the General Assembly. To achieve this, the advance notices on the opening of speakers list and timely information on the decision taken whether request to take a floor was granted is important. While supporting increased communication and meetings among the President of the Security Council, General Assembly, and the Economic and Social Council, we propose the inclusion of the chairpersons from the main General Assembly committees in the certain meetings. We also would encourage early sharing of drafting products and reports presented to the Council for its consideration. This would assure better transparency and provide possibilities for informal consultation. Madam President, in conclusion, allow me to reiterate my appreciation for holding this timely discussion, and I will look forward to an analytical summary to be produced as the outcome of the proposals made in this open debate. I thank you, Madam.
I thank the representative of Lithuania for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Saudi Arabia.
سعادة الرئيس، أصحاب السعادة، ممثلي الدول الأعضاء في مجلس الأمن، أود في البداية أن أتقدم بالشكر الجزيل لبعثة اليابان.
Members of the Security Council, I wish to begin by thanking the Japanese delegation for having convened this important meeting to discuss the working methods of the Security Council, and I also wish to thank the Executive Director of Security Council report for her detailed briefing and for her central role in constructive efforts in this regard. This meeting is being held at a critical juncture which requires a review of the flaws which prevent the Security Council from fully delivering upon its mandate. The Kingdom has always adopted a position in favor of transparency and objectivity in the Council's working methods, to ensure that it be in a position to deliver upon the mandate with which it has been entrusted, specifically in the light of the tremendous challenges faced by the international community. And there is a need for the Council to be as effective and efficient as possible. The Security Council needs to, in an impartial and objective way, fill the gap and deal with the subjects inscribed on its agenda within its mandate. The world has seen the Council recently been unable to deliver upon its responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, specifically when it comes to ending the war and the horrific aggression against Gaza, failing to protect the Palestinian people in the entire occupied Palestinian territory. This reflects the degree to which there is a need to adopt comprehensive and meaningful reform at the Security Council in order to uphold the purposes and principles of the Charter of the organization. Palestine has been enduring consecutive crises. This is a consequence of Israeli practices who have continued to target the defenseless Palestinian people. They've been suffering for decades the consequences of the Israeli occupation of their land. The Council remains incapable of even adopting a humanitarian resolution to call for a ceasefire and for the delivery of humanitarian assistance to the besieged people in Gaza. Madam President, support for efforts to make progress in a process that was begun in 1993. There's a need to make progress on this reform for taking into account the complementarity between the Security Council, the General Assembly, and ECOSOC. This is the best way for the Council's work to be carried out in a comprehensive and smooth way. There are efforts being undertaken to improve transparency and efficiency and inclusivity. Nonetheless, up until today, we have been unable to reach a comprehensive solution. We have been unable to implement a solution for the Council to be able to deliver upon its duties in a manner that rises to the expectations. The efforts of the informal working group, as well as the update of Note 507 on the Council's working methods, are indeed steps in the right direction to improve working methods, specifically when it comes to the adverse consequences of the exercise of the veto on the maintenance of international peace and security. The unjustified exercise of the veto clearly in no way advances peace and security, and in no way upholds the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. The toll of innocent civilians killed in Gaza perfectly encapsulates the misuse and the consequences thereof, the consequences of misuse of the veto. Our country calls for a positive and dynamic consideration of the proposals related to Security Council reform. Negotiations being carried out at the General Assembly remain the only way, the only body to reach an agreement on the expansion of the Security Council and to achieve reform under Resolution 62/557 of the General Assembly, resolution which was unanimously, or by consensus rather, which was adopted by consensus, so that at the culmination of negotiations, the Council will be more representative, it will be more transparent, more impartial, more credible. We stand ready to cooperate with Member States to achieve this noble goal. Thank you for your attention, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Saudi Arabia for their statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Hi.